Representative Gonzalez, from this vantage point, 135 days in, do you think it's been a successful session as you would have defined it at the beginning?
I haven't had coffee. Let me just start with that. No, I would, definitely. I think that you have to remember where we were 2 years ago. 2 years ago at this moment, we had already passed SB4. We had already had all these conversations about the bathroom bill.
Right.
We hadn't really focused on a lot of our state's priorities. What can I say now? We came out of the gate, HB3, other initiatives that are really important to the state. Yeah, I would say it's successful.
Yeah. Representative Springer, the two theories of the case at this point, like I say, 5 days out from sine die, is one, that Kumbaya basically held. Leadership is still singing more or less in three-part harmony, right? Everybody's playing nice. I mean, there have been moments, last night is an example, but it's the exception that proves the rule. Basically, you're going to get out of here, it looks like, without a special session, most sharp objects off the table. But the second theory of the case is that that's all a charade and a facade, and that the normal things that divide you divided you, and that in the end, there may be less of that, but Kumbaya is a myth.
Well, I think the divide within the House was non-existent.
Right.
I mean, you know, even with a little bit of last night going
R versus D, R versus R, D versus D,
I mean,
largely
we
not
came in focused.
Right.
And when you look at what we did on HB3, SB1, SB2,
right,
and focusing on those core functions
right.
of government and making sure we were addressing truly what Texans expect us to work on and deal with, you know, I think it's a huge success. And I think that I think we're close on 1, 2, and 3. I think we're going to land the planes.
Right. Let's observe that we are 5 days out. We do not have a budget entirely done. We do not have a public education bill entirely done. I want to get to that very soon and talk about where we have still to go. We do not have a tax bill still done. Ross Ramsey assures me that that is not unusual this late in a session. I called and I said, is it weird if I went back and looked last session, was the budget done? If I went back to the previous? He says, no, there's still time.
They're both, I mean, they're big things. And I mean, you're constantly tweaking for that last little bit that either your side or your district wants if you're a conferee.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Gonzalez could talk more to that as a conferee to HB3. You know.
But you're confident and you're calm.
I am, absolutely.
Relatively speaking.
For the first time ever.
Yeah, maybe for the first time ever. We haven't mentioned feral hogs in the last 5 minutes, so you're on the leash. That's good. Representative Leach, you were one of those members who had a closer election in 2018 than maybe you thought, right? And the theory is that the elections of 2018 set the tone and the table for this session. Do you think, looking back at the message delivered by the voters as you and others took it, that you have aligned pretty much with what was coming out of the election?
Well, I don't think there's any question that the voters spoke clearly to every legislator, to me, to my colleagues here, and to all 150 representatives. And this session has been a product of that, I should say. And we've been laser focused on those issues that the voters told us are important to them: education, property tax relief, and reform. You know, a number of other issues. We've had, Evan, our debates and our disagreements, but in the House, we've been laser focused on those issues, and we've done so in a collaborative way.
Do you think that the voters anticipated, as we who've been around for a while anticipate every session, that there are going to be things that are going to come up that no one is thinking about back in November or December, no one's even thinking about in January, and that you just sort of accept that as part of the deal? Right, so if there are moments where you guys veer a little bit away from the all business script, that's just taken by the voters as well. That's just the legislature being the legislature. It's not too out of the realm of normal.
Well, there's no question. We talk about the budget, school finance, and property tax relief and reform. Those have been the three issues that have commanded the discussion. And frankly, those are the three issues that Speaker Bonnen and the leadership team have kept us focused on. But of course, we consider thousands of other pieces of legislation, many of which we've been working for a long time.
Some not controversial, some controversial.
Right.
But as long as you get the big three things taken care of, the voters are going to go, good, you did what you said you were going to do.
That's right, and it's the role of the Speaker and House leadership to set the tone where each member, Evan, can vigorously represent his or her district and his or her values, and that's happened this session. So I would say it's been a very successful session in that regard.
Dr. Gonzalez, so you are a conferee on HB3.
Yes, sir.
So our understanding is that property tax bill, you know, we're sort of okay on. I mean, fighting about it beforehand notwithstanding, kind of go forward, it's going to get done fine. Budget, conferees are pretty much done with what they're doing. Go forward, it's just fine. I'm hearing as of this morning that HB 3 is not a done deal and that there are still pretty significant issues to be resolved. Property, current year versus prior year values is an unresolved issue as I understand it. Is that true?
I think HB 3 is the largest piece of school finance policy we've seen in a long time. Are there things that still need to be worked out? Sure. I will tell you that's not true in the current year, prior year.
So current year, prior year that's resolved?
I think so.
Right, so the text I got from somebody in the House yesterday saying the House has gotten rolled on current year versus prior year values by the Senate. Would you care to comment on that?
I will say this. I am so proud of the HB 3 conferees on the House side that we have really just wanted, the first question when we get a proposal is what is the best for all the state? What is the best for education? And we don't come in with an ideology. We genuinely evaluate every proposal put in front of us, and that takes a lot of time. We were here. We have been in conference for days, and we have locked ourselves in rooms for hours. And so I genuinely believe that the House isn't getting rolled. The House true mission is still there, that we're going to create a transformative public education finance bill, and we're going to truly try to make it for all the state of Texas.
So the prior versus current year, you say, is not an issue still to be resolved?
I think that there are other issues that we are working through.
Is the formula issue one, as I understand it, still to be resolved?
I think that's done too.
You think so?
I think we're more done than not done.
How about the teacher pay issue? I understand the Senate is still on that $5,000 thing.
I think
you
we
guys
have
are
more
not there.
done than not done.
But you're not going to give me, Dr. Gonzalez, give it up. Come on. You're not going to tell me which things are outstanding?
I love you, no.
No. Representative Leach, Representative Springer, I believe the only no vote on the education bill to begin with was the aforementioned endlessly charming Representative Stickland. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Right. So the likelihood of this bill coming back from conference in a form that 76 people do not support it is absolutely zero.
I would absolutely bet
This gets
everything
done,
I
Representative
have.
Leach?
I believe so, absolutely.
No
yes.
question.
And to kind of testament about HB1, SB2, HB3 not being done, I think for the first time in a long time, these pieces are so interconnected. You can't finish one without finishing the other. And
Right.
so I think when one is done, they'll all be done, and then it'll be end
Right.
game.
Back to this question, Dr. Gonzalez, that you brought up about sharp objects being off the table. So we didn't come back to bathrooms, we didn't come back to vouchers, we didn't pick back up a conversation around sanctuary cities, although we didn't undo the work of the last session either. That stuff largely was, in fact, off the table, right? That's gone,
Mostly.
not coming back.
Right.
Right. Representative Leach, are you surprised that that stuff did not come back? Or, again, is that consistent with the election results of last time? Nobody wanted to have that
Well,
conversation.
Evan, when you say that stuff, what specifically are we talking
Well, I
about?
named 3 things. I can name them again. Bathrooms, vouchers, sanctuary cities.
I'm not at all surprised that those were not a part of the agenda this session.
Right, because the voters did not want you to be back to that stuff.
Yes.
Right.
Well, and those were not priorities of the state. We addressed those last session, and I think every legislator felt fairly confident that there were other issues that we needed to be focused on.
Right.
And that's what we did.
I mean, the alternative is if we focus on those things, then what gets sacrificed is public education. So if we only have 140 days every 2 years to do something, and we can either focus on something that divides us beyond breaking point, where then we can't get the actual things that Texans needs done, or we can say we're going to focus on these things like public ed. And I think that's the choices we made.
Right. But Representative Springer, as you know, it's not as if some issues did not arrive as sharp objects that were not intended to be there. The resolution of the so-called Chick-fil-A bill last week was one of those. The bill, SB 22, that got between municipalities and their ability to make deals with abortion providers was another one. Both of those in the last couple of days flared up as issues that were a little bit more controversial and divisive.
They were. I think they're on the scale of 1 to 10, though. They were definitely at the low end on what the reach was that they were attempting to do on those and the issues they were looking to address. So I think that's why, it might have been a half a day or a little bit of a dust up in those.
Right.
And I think in this session media coverage, y'all were really hungry to talk about those things because we haven't had a whole lot.
You think we made something of that issue?
I think you elevated it higher than what I think it was on the floor.
Right.
Yes, was it an issue on the floor? Absolutely. We
Dr.
have those issues.
Dr. Gonzalez, was the media's coverage of that issue what made you cry at the front, Mike?
She did not cry, for the record.
I almost cried, though.
I know, I do.
I mean, I held back.
Right. Were we the problem, Dr. Gonzalez? I mean, it seems to me those issues were a little bit more dividing than Representative Springer is perhaps suggesting.
I feel that experiencing discrimination is always hard.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to minimize it because we think it is less impactful, the public policy part of it, than the reality of it. And so here's what I will say. The difference between last session and this session is last session, those conversations, the divisive conversations, dominated the entire session. It took out all the oxygen in the air. But this session, we did have, I feel, a very dangerous anti-LGBT bill on the floor. And I think what we wanted to do, I will say this, in 2012 when I got elected, I was the only LGBT person. Now to have 5 out LGBT women, to us have allies and it be a different energy, that is transformative. But the bills, specifically that one, because it's so personal to me, it's not just nothing. It continues to perpetuate the rhetoric that leads to kids being bullied in schools, to trans women being bullied beaten to death on the streets, to the reality of discrimination that exists in society. At some point, I would wish we could say, you know what? There's a million other issues this state has to deal with. We are not going to contribute to this rhetoric that impacts people's lives.
And to Representative Springer,
I would say, and if I was out of context, it was absolutely not nothing. But it was one of those that when it's done, it doesn't continue to dominate what we're discussing for the next week or the next 2 weeks or all session.
Right.
Or it leads us into attacking each other personally on other issues.
I will agree with that.
That was my point.
Yeah. But I think that is an intentional decision on our part too, right?
Absolutely.
Like on both sides, here's what I will say. On both sides, we made intentional decisions for it to not dominate the space and overtake it. I mean, yesterday when we finally passed the anti-LGBT bill, it was a weird day for me because the worst bill for me got passed in the morning and my best bill that brought water and wastewater infrastructure to low-income Texas and rural Texas also passed, right?
That I helped you whip.
I know you helped me whip it, thank you. It was a weird tension that there were these moments and then there were these moments, but it's complex.
and you're able to compartmentalize that. I mean, Representative Leach, we shouldn't be surprised, right? The close elections notwithstanding, Republicans still vote like Republicans, conservatives vote like conservatives, Democrats vote like Democrats. It's not as if because the election was closer, you're all of a sudden going to start agreeing on everything or give up your core principles, right?
That's right. And what has been so wonderful about the Texas House this session is we've, I think, shown to the people of Texas, shown to the rest of this country that you can govern, you can disagree, you can debate, you can even disagree and debate vigorously on very important issues, but you can do so in a respectful, collaborative way. I believe more so than ever after this session that the Texas House in all the world is one of the great legislative bodies that still works. And the people of Texas, we don't always get it right. We do not always get it right, stipulated. But the people of Texas can look to their house and know that their business is being taken care of, and now we leave and we go live and work under the laws that we create.
Right.
And thank God we won't be back for another 18 months.
So you generally buy the idea that you minimize, there were going to be differences, of course, there were always differences, there were going to be things that flare up as controversies, but they were limited, they were contained, and they were minimal relative to the overall work of the session.
That's right. And look, Mary Gonzalez and I, we're classmates and friends. We're almost family. We've worked together on 99% of issues over the years and some really important issues this session together. And it breaks my heart as her friend and her colleague to hear her talk about an anti-LGBTQ bill that was passed yesterday. I don't view the bill that way. We have some disagreement there. But when she walked down the aisle yesterday from the front mic, walked right by my desk, we kind of grabbed hands and went on to the next bill. She knows that I'm for Mary, and I know that Mary's for Jeff and for the state, and that has been evident this session.
Representative Leach, you were in the Freedom Caucus prior to the session, somewhat famously made a decision to withdraw from the Freedom Caucus. You still identify as a conservative. You're still a conservative Republican in this House.
I am.
The other critique of this session is that it wasn't conservative enough, right? There are people on the right who have said, where is the conservative agenda in this legislature? First of all, we had the spectacle, even though it hasn't gone anywhere, of the elected leadership of the state, governor, lieutenant governor, plus the speaker, advocating for a tax increase. The fact that it was a sales tax increase and the fact that that money would have been used to buy down property taxes notwithstanding, you had conservatives say, when did the Republican Party become the party of of tax increases. You have other states that have moved much farther on abortion, another issue that I know you care a lot about, than Texas did. Why didn't Texas go in the direction of some of these other states and become even more? There are conservatives who think maybe you were not conservative enough this session. What do you say to that?
I disagree strongly. I disagree strongly. We had a remarkable session, productive session for the people that was conservative. And I could go list by list, point by point, talking about conservative achievements. Did we get everything done we wanted? No. Did everyone hit a grand slam? No. There's always going to be work for us to be done. But I'm getting tired of people who only want to focus on the negative and continue to launch bombs at what happens in that building across the street when we have accomplished a lot for the people of Texas. And I'm excited to go back home, Evan, and talk to my Republican voters and my Democrat voters about what we accomplished, and believe that they can take a lot of victories from this session.
Representative Springer, was this a conservative session as it appears to be coming to a close?
No, I think it was. I think, you know, we focused on those. I mean, you know, it got labeled out there a tax increase. It was a tax swap. Yes, it did increase one and lowered another. And when we got to discussing, it was 100%. So I don't see that as a tax increase.
Right.
But
you heard the same things I heard. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, we've heard the outcry of we need property tax relief, and that was a potential solution to that problem. It didn't get the traction it needed to get off the ground, but I don't think there was anything non-conservative about that proposal whatsoever. You look through the rest of it, HB 3 has almost $3 billion of tax relief in it. It is eliminating, or not eliminating, a big chunk of buy down of recapture, something I know that Representative Leach hears a lot in his district. I hear in about a third of my 72 school districts that's a big issue. You know, so when you look at those things in an education bill, we did very conservative stuff. You know, I think that rings through. SB 2, I think we're going to SB 2 down. You know, having triggers in there, getting voters more involved.
Right.
With that, I think that's very conservative. Those
I mean,
are
the fact is you're probably going to end up at 3.5%, mostly, if not entirely, on the threshold,
That's right.
which is not only lower than the current threshold significantly, it's lower than your best attempt at this.
That's
or
exactly
the Senate's
right. So
best attempt at
that
this.
shows me it's conservative.
I mean, many of us out in the world said you couldn't even agree on 4 and 6 and settle on 5, and so you decided to come back and do lower. Yeah, hilarious. That's never going to work. Yeah. You all showed us.
That's exactly right.
You all got to that point.
When the big three and then all those that are also elected work in the same direction on that,
right.
we get those things.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Evan, to see that some of the folks who are opposing legislation this session supported legislation, the same legislation last session, and in fact supported more watered down pieces of legislation last session. It's important we be consistent on our positions.
Well, and can I say, let's imagine that we did live this reality of a conservative legislative session that in the ways that people imagine conservative.
Right.
I think that would have broken the Texas House. So here's what I was afraid of. So we came in 2012. I believe, and we were talking about this the other day, that the Texas House was in a trajectory to become much more like Washington. And I think that we needed a session that was dominated on issues and things that Texas needed. And that was done in a conservative way, I'll be honest, because I would have done it a little bit differently. But I do think, and what I was most scared of didn't happen. And I feel that Texas reclaimed the Texas House for Texas. I would say I would love for us to get to a space where we weren't about a conservative agenda or a progressive agenda, but a Texas agenda, because I do think Texas is very unique than the rest of the country.
Yeah. I want to talk about some things that didn't happen. You know, every session is the story of what did happen, but it's also the story of what didn't happen. What didn't happen in the previous session was a lot bigger things. But the stuff that didn't happen this session is still pretty interesting. As of right now, and again, there's still a couple days left, the voting rights legislation, SB 9, that was controversial, that had the potential to be one of those things, seems to be gone. Was that gone as part of a deal to get other stuff done, Representative Springer?
Not to my knowledge.
Representative Leach?
Not to my knowledge either.
So what happened? I mean, presumably, if that bill comes to the floor, there are enough votes to pass that bill in this House.
Well, you know what? One of the great things, among others, that has been unique in this session, different in this session than our past 3 sessions, is the Speaker and leadership have let the committee process work. They have, and I've been in many meetings with my colleagues and the Speaker, the leadership team. He has not kept his thumb on the scales telling members what bills they can and can't
So Jeannie
hear.
Morrison, who's chair of elections, killed SB 9?
Stephanie Click.
Stephanie Click, pardon me, killed
No,
SB 9?
no, but I do think that Chairwoman Click listened to her committee members, listened to other members, and was unable to move a piece of legislation that could have gotten to the floor that everyone would have been happy and comfortable with. And that's the way the committee process works. Look, every session, good legislation passes and some good legislation doesn't pass. Right. So every session, some bad bills pass. But this session, look, we made a lot of progress. Unfortunately, that bill did not move forward. But I don't think it's the fault of leadership telling Stephanie or her committee, don't let this out.
When the bill did pass committee, it also went to calendars, where I do think the calendars committee was more transparent than ever before.
Right.
And so, again, if we're going to focus on priorities, I'd rather focus on getting water and wastewater infrastructure for rural Texas, which did get on the calendar,
right.
As opposed to focusing on a bill like SB 9.
Right. Representative Springer, heading into this session, if I was sure of one thing, it was that you guys were going to tell Austin and San Antonio that they couldn't mandate paid sick leave for businesses. How'd you guys fumble that?
You know, I know that it came through from the Senate aspect side of things, and I always tell everybody, they always say, well, what did the Senate do? And I say, honestly, I usually try not to pay too much attention. I'm focused on trying to learn how to be a chairman and do those things. But, you know, they didn't pass a simple paid sick leave bill. It got things added onto it that then made it something I think that the Texas House sat and looked at and says, that's beyond what we wanted to focus on.
So Chair Phelan told me and told others that his problem was simply the non-discrimination language that had been stripped from the Senate bill that he reinserted. He said if it comes back from conference, if we pass it and it goes over to the conference committee, it comes back in the form that the Senate sent it to us originally, he was not going to support it. He basically telegraphed, we're not doing it that way. And it just seemed to lose all its momentum. And now you guys have not banned paid sick leave.
It's exactly right. I had 3899 that dealt with regulations on businesses, but I had an NDO language in there. That bill didn't move either.
Do you agree with Chairman Phelan reinserting that language, keeping it?
You know, we sat there as a committee in State Affairs and said, that's not the fight we're having this session.
Right.
If we're going to address the issues, let's address them now.
Right. Representative Leach, is it better to have no bill than the bill that came over from the Senate?
I'm disappointed that bill didn't move. I'm disappointed the SB 9, the voting rights bill didn't move. But, you know, in my committee, we heard an abortion bill that a lot of Texans registered support for, but it would have criminalized women who had abortion,
you got a bunch of guff for it, didn't
would
you?
have possibly subjected those women to the death penalty.
Right.
And I was not going to let that bill out of my committee.
Yeah.
There's no way, shape, or form that I was going to let that bill, and that's the prerogative of the chairman. And I'm pro-life through and through, but I believe that's the wrong direction for the pro-life movement in Texas and in this country. And so I killed the bill, and I don't have one regret about that.
Right. You would have thought paid sick leave was dead, don't you? Didn't you?
Well, here's what I will say. I think we need to look at the bigger picture. I think that the Senate had a very extreme bill. Came over to the House, and the State Affairs Committee tried to amend it.
Yep.
I think at that point there was a leadership decision. Do we take a bill to the floor that we know even if we pass it in the ways that the State Affairs Committee wants it, I will say I didn't want it, period, but the way the State Affairs Committee wanted it, and then it went to the Senate, and then there was no way to conference it, then why spend the time and energy in the political fight breaking people apart over a bill that would never be able to find a space?
Well, and also, why put people in a position of having to take a vote that ultimately is going to be meaningless since the bill's not going to get to the governor's desk?
Exactly. And Lieutenant Governor had always said, this is the only way I'll accept it. So then, so why waste valuable time in a legislative session where an hour equals a day to get something done?
Let me ask you, Representative Springer, about one more piece of legislation that, again, heading into the session, I would have thought was a layup or something closer to a layup and ultimately didn't make, and that was the ban on lobbying by cities, taxpayer-funded lobbying by cities and counties. This is the Middleton Bill. This didn't just fail, this failed significantly. I noted that, you know, the only candidate for speaker back in the pre-Bonnen days who voted for the Middleton Bill was Phil King. Ford Price opposed it, John Zerwas opposed it, Tan Parker opposed it, Travis Clardy, I mean, you know, there were a lot of Republican no votes on that bill. I thought you guys hated the cities.
No, we all live in one.
Well, Munster is probably only technically a city.
Y'all would only be so lucky if all your cities were like Munster.
Sure.
You know, look, hey, once again, every member has to stand by their vote. There was no doubt that some people thought that that was too far. I voted for it. So, you know, from that standpoint, I was a little bit surprised to see, knowing what a priority was from a conservative agenda standpoint, that it didn't. Now, you know, as we said, coming into this, we listened to voters. I think coming back out of this, that now has a lot more spotlight shined on it. We'll see if voters think that that was important.
It's something that could conceivably come back up in another form. I mean, Representative Leach, this is why, again, there are some conservatives who say you guys had more than enough Republicans to pass a conservative agenda if you simply had held together. You couldn't get voting rights done. You couldn't get ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying by municipalities done. You couldn't get the paid sick leave done, which, again, seemed like the layup of all layups. And so they say, what were you guys doing?
Well, I'm disappointed that the SB 29 did not pass, and I like Representative Springer, was shocked that a number of our colleagues. You
were surprised.
I was surprised, especially after I mean, it was a very watered-down bill. We took ISDs out completely. It would have had no impact on the PTA or school districts. It was cities and counties. There was a population threshold.
I mean, the Ashby Amendment that I believe passed, basically by the time that bill got to a vote, the only city that would have been affected by that bill was Austin, it felt like.
Yeah. And
I will say that, you know, everybody talks about the fact there was only 20 counties. That's still 80% of the population of the state of Texas.
Peace, right.
Yeah, so I was surprised it did not pass.
Yeah.
And disappointed.
Let's talk about Bonnen, the speaker. So we had you here in November at the University of Texas campus to talk about what the Bonnen administration would be like. It was a foregone conclusion at that point that he would be speaker. He was not speaker. I went back and listened to our conversation to hear what you predicted life under the speaker would be, and I want to ask you if you were right, now that you've actually lived under Bonnen. Representative Springer, you said he would let members drive the business of the House. Did he?
Absolutely.
You said he would keep outside influences out, lobbyists and consultants. Did he?
Absolutely, more than anybody, and probably further than I thought it could have been done.
Seriously? You said that he would stand up for the House, which I took to mean, although you didn't say it this way, I'm always looking for drama, against the Senate. I inserted the words against the Senate when you said that originally. Did he stand up for the House?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's made, the public comments he's made of saying on HB3, what the work that the House did, he stood up for the House.
Well, he kind of was smack-talking Bettencourt from the dais, which I kind of thought that was something, wasn't it? When have we seen a speaker do that?
Standing up for the House.
When that was standing up for the House.
Absolutely. For the work product that we had done, that was standing up for the House.
Dr. Gonzalez, you predicted that under Speaker Bonnen, all bills would get heard. However, you defined all and heard.
I think that's a very true statement. Yes. I think that the chairpeople, chairwomen, we're great about, even if I disagree, I'll give an example. I had an SB4 bill to minimize it, to exempt universities and hospitals. That bill got a hearing in State Affairs.
Right. And you know, Representative Israel has pointed out in another context that a number of LGBTQ agenda items this session got hearings.
For the first time ever.
They were not going to get an up or down vote. They were not going to pass the House, but it was baby steps, and she viewed that as progress versus previous sessions in that one issue area or set of issue areas where that represents a change in the way things had happened in the past.
I mean, I'll give Chairman Leach an example. He gave from one perspective to another perspective hearings, and I think it's important for us as policymakers to hear all sides. And so I genuinely appreciate that part of democracy.
You said that Speaker Presumptive at the time, Bonnen, would let Democrats be part of the broad conversation in leadership and in the administration of the House. Did that happen?
Definitely.
You absolutely feel like that happened. Did he change the culture of the place? Can you really change the culture of a place that's been around for 86 sessions, but did he make a difference in that? Let me just ask it that way.
I think universities change culture all the time, but yes, you can, and I think he did exactly what I was talking about when I was worried that we were becoming more like Washington, more divisive, more partisan. That is not the reality.
Representative Leach, you said that Speaker Bonnen would let members represent their districts. Did he?
No question.
Give me an example.
There's 150 of them. I mean, every member, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a member, you could probably find one or two, that did not feel empowered and allowed, Evan, to represent his or her district.
Even if you voted against the party or voted against the days?
Yes, and look at the committee appointments. People were put where they're gifted, where they're skilled, where they had experience, with what they asked for. The petty personal politics, this culture of retribution, is non-existent in the House right now. for the most part. And the rules, this is really important. The rules have been fairly, openly, and transparently enforced. And that, to me, is the most important thing this session. Our parliamentarians have done a wonderful job under the Speaker's leadership of fairly enforcing the rules. And that's a monumental transformative change in the Texas House.
Right, and to go back to what happened last night, it's been observed to me that in a previous era of the House, the point of order that took down the mental health consortium bill originally was, the point of order was accepted effectively, right? The bill was killed temporarily until the thing came back. That in a previous era, the rules might have been flouted to say we're going to overrule that point of order simply because we know this is a priority, it's the governor's priority, it's our priority. Rules are rules.
That's right.
And what happened on the back part of that conversation when the Speaker's brother came up and they did the Amendment D and all that, that was also, you know, you kind of climb up Rule Book Mountain, you also have to climb down Rule Book Mountain.
That's right.
Right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's pretty much
I mean,
how it is.
just a few weeks ago, someone, I don't remember who it was, called a point of order on a Dr. Greg Bonnen bill. And the Speaker sustained the point of order and killed his own brother's bill.
Cold, man.
And so...
That's some Cain and Abel stuff right there.
But it was at that point, I think that was a moment of clarity and confidence for the members where you realize that the Speaker is blind to whatever member is or what the issue is. The rules matter, and he enforced them. And like I said, that to me is an incredibly positive development.
When I asked you about Bonnen, Representative Leach, in November, you said, we can trust him. The implication was that you felt like maybe in a previous era of speakers, and you only served under one, so we know who you're talking about, that you didn't necessarily always feel, I mean, if you were calling out Bonnen as an improvement over the current order because you felt you could trust him, I took that to mean that maybe you didn't always feel like you could trust the last regime.
Well, I don't want to talk about the last regime, with all due respect. The outgoing speaker, or former speaker, I should say, did an admirable job leading the House, and so I don't want to denigrate or cast shade on that at all.
But you felt like you could trust Bonnen.
We needed a new, fresh wind of leadership in the House. It was time.
And you got it.
And we got it. Members trust Bonnen. He does what he says, and he's a guy you can trust. And I haven't always agreed with him. I haven't. We've had our disagreements, and they've been open and honest and transparent, and we've gone about our business. But absolutely, 110%.
You feel like you know where you stand. You feel like you know where you stand with him always.
I do. I do, absolutely, and I think every member would say that.
You all feel that
yes.
way, right? Mr. Springer. Again, back to this question of the House and the Senate and standing up for the House. How do you feel the House worked with the Senate? How has the House worked with the Senate this time? Better than last time?
You know, I think we have, from what we are, because I think we have stayed for a large part in a lockstep together. I think there's some people that have fallen in and out of it, but when we stay focused on those big issues, we're still moving forward. It's not one person has submarined because they had a difference of opinion on one side of the chamber or the other.
Right.
With it. So I think we have.
The Senate has not gotten in the way of the House doing its business in the way that maybe in previous iterations of this legislature that had happened.
Well,
Representative Gonzalez.
I feel like there was a lot of honest transparency. Like, here's how far we will go, here's what we want, and I think when you just come to the table and say, here's what we're doing, and we can figure out how to do that collectively, or we can just not do it. And I think that honesty that we're gonna just tell you point blank has really helped the House and Senate navigate our relationship as well.
Yeah. Representative Leach, let me ask you about the governor absent versus Governor Abbott conversation. So at the conclusion of last session, there were people who raised, conservatives who raised issues about the governor's role or lack of role in mediating disputes between the House and the Senate, in weighing in a timely fashion on issues that up to that point had not been resolved. The conventional wisdom this session is that the governor has been much more actively involved from the very beginning, has been much more of a presence, has been much more of a facilitator of agreement, and that he comes out of this session with everybody in the legislature feeling better about his role than they did at the end of last session.
Well, I felt good about his role last session, but I'll tell you this session, he's been incredibly involved. I know that members have had an open door to his staff and to him. The other day I walked in.
He's been on the floor a lot also,
He's been on the floor a lot.
Although he hasn't wanted to talk to reporters, he has wanted to talk to other people.
He's been communicating with the members. The other day, I and a couple other members walked into his office expecting to meet with the chief of staff, Mr. Sines, And we walked in, and Mr. Saenz took us into the governor's office.
Right.
The governor was sitting there waiting. He wanted to be a part of that conversation. He's been incredibly active, engaged, and that's why I think we're going to have a successful session. It's important to note as well that Speaker Bonnen is still communicating with the Lieutenant Governor. That's a departure from last session.
As far as I know, they're still having breakfast.
That's right. And so he's setting the example. And when a House member is having trouble with their bill on the Senate side, and they go to the Speaker and say, hey, what do I do about this? Help me. And the Speaker will tell them, I've heard him say that, as he said it to me, we'll go over there and talk to the senator. And he set the example by his communications, continued communications with the Lieutenant Governor himself.
Yeah. Representative Springer, it's easier if you're the governor to be more involved and to be more visible when you're simply doing things like school finance and property taxes. You may not want to be around when some of those flaming bags are at the top of the agenda, as had been the case previously.
You know, I don't think that that's the reason that the governor was involved. Look, when we're focused for the first time not in a lawsuit on school finance, when we're talking about major property tax reform, you know, he's been right there and engaged in knowing what the conversation is,
right,
and lending his knowledge and assets, but also listening and understanding from Dan Huberty. I mean, he is engaged with Dan and allowing Dan to do his work, and he appreciates it. He's not telling the chairman what to do. It is a two-way communication, and it's fantastic to see.
Right. I mean, just to quickly go back to the Bonnen thing for a second, and then I want to roll forward. One of the things about Bonnen that seems to be the case is he seems to let his chairs chair his committees.
Absolutely.
Right, which may not always be the case every place.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And so to the Huberty point, Huberty really has been in the driver's seat on that public education stuff.
No, absolutely. And to that point, I mean, it's a first-time chair for Jeff and I both, and
right,
I'm sitting looking at industrial hemp, not just a huge big issue, but some people have this perceived deal. Ask the speaker, hey, what do you want? He goes, just do what's right.
Right.
And that was his only message to me, just do what's right, Drew.
Right. All right, so I want to quickly speed round it, and then I want to talk about 2020. Tell me a Republican and a Democrat not on the stage, Representative Springer, who had a great session. If you were writing the best and worst list for Texas Monthly, give me a Republican and a Democrat who you think had particularly good sessions.
You know, on the Republican side, it'd be hard to pick anybody but Dan Huberty. I mean, HB3 is just so monumental. It'd be really tough for me to pick that. Although I would probably also throw Speaker Bonnen in there, just simply because I might want to be on a committee again. But
you like that gavel, don't you?
I like the gavel. It's fun.
Yeah.
But
give me a Democrat who had a particularly good session.
I think there's an awful lot of them. I didn't see anybody who had a bad session, and so I may not be able to be the best guide to pick who was the top of that peak in there. But I thought
there's a bunch.
Whether it's Pancho Navarez, whether it's Rafael Anchia, Eddie Rodriguez, I thought had a good session behind me.
Representative Gonzalez, pick one of your fellow Democrats who you think had a particularly good session.
Celia Israel and Rafael Anchia.
Both. And is there a Republican?
Mary Gonzalez. Joe Moody, hello.
Yes.
Sorry.
There you go.
I needed more coffee. Joe Moody all day, every day.
Yeah.
Right. Pot and criminal justice.
No, leadership and compromise and guidance and mentorship, that.
And pot and criminal justice.
I mean, we need those things for those things. So.
Right, okay. Representative Leach, be generous to one of your fellow Republicans.
Well,
who had a good session.
Dustin Burrows, Chairman Burrows, has had a remarkable session, incredible heavy lift. Property tax relief and reform is no joke.
He landed the plane, and there was a moment there where there was significant turbulence.
Right,
and
his
while
desk mate.
he chaired our caucus.
That's right, and he chaired the Republican caucus, and I've been with him more than any member on the floor, being his desk mate, and I've seen him be a steady hand through some turbulent waters on that issue. And Joe Moody was going to be who I would say on the Democrat side.
Right.
You'd be hard pressed to find a better, more decent guy on the floor of the Texas House than Joe Moody.
Who was the biggest star among the freshmen?
Oh my gosh, so many. Biggest star. I love myself some Aaron Zwiener, Julie Johnson, and Jessica Gonzalez. So obviously those three women are my women. I will say this. I think I'm gonna get in a lot of trouble. You always get me in trouble.
I know what you're gonna say.
I think this freshman class was probably one of the best freshman classes since our freshman class. I really loved them. Republican and Democrats. Jared Patterson, who thinks very differently than me, is great. Steve Allison, Keith Bell. I mean, we really have an outstanding freshman class.
Represent?
I mean, absolutely.
Anybody in particular?
No, I mean, you know, especially for me from the Republican side, I mean, every single one of them, Candy Noble, Ben Lamont, I mean, you know, working on some heavy issues. I mean, Candy Noble had a heavy lift for us as Republicans. But Ben Lamont going in and aggressively working on high-speed rail issues, which is huge for his district, and did a fantastic job, acted like he was in his 5th term, not his 1st term.
Right.
Yeah.
Rep. Leach?
I was going to say Representative Noble. She has had a heavy lift, and she's done great. I agree with Ben Lamont as well. Leo Pacheco has been great. He's been wonderful to work with.
Yep.
It's a great freshman class. Not as good as ours, though.
No, ours is the rock star freshman class of the freshman
All
class.
right. So I want to ask you about, before we go to questions, I want to ask you about 2020 and the consequence of this. So the theory was, coming out of the last election, Representative Leach, we talked about this, there were a number of races that were much closer than people anticipated. Some people lost who people didn't expect.
Sorry.
There's a table right here.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. And you all were basically told, we're going to give you 2 years to do the business of the state, and if you don't do the business of the state, we're coming for you. The reality is, even though you did the business of the state, they're still coming for you. There are 9 seats that the Democrats need to pick up net to get back control of the House, to elect the Democratic Speaker, presumably heading into redistricting. So all the chips are on that square for the Democrats. They think they can get to 9 net, and one of those districts they think they can get to 9 with is yours, but there are a number of others. And then there were some Democrats who won last time who they think they have to work hard to protect. Do you come out of the session better off, you think? Do the bareleys, as Ross named them, the people who barely won last time, have less to worry about heading into the next election cycle? Or is it too soon to know what the political environment is heading into 2020?
Let us finish session first. We got 5 days and we got to get our work done. I will tell you that I'm very confident as I head home. The voters spoke in November. We have done a great job in my district listening to our voters, whether it's my tour of every single public school in my district last year, town hall meetings, communicating with voters both before and during session. I feel very confident, Evan, that I've focused and delivered on the issues, the big issues that are important to my district. They're the boss. I'm not, and so I'm going to have to go back home and do a job interview, as I have to do every 2 years. But I'm excited to get home and to do that.
You think you have a work product that you can take back home
Absolutely,
and
yes.
sell them?
Yes.
And any concerns that may have been raised prior to the last election, you think, I got this?
Yes, I think we've done a good job this session.
You have confirmed to us today that you are planning to run again. Have you
I
said
am,
that? Have you
yes.
said that previously?
Well, let me talk to my wife first, and my kids.
You want to get her on speaker?
With their
I mean,
blessing.
You seem to have your phone out. Do you
Yeah.
want to get them on speaker
With
now?
their blessing and their support, I look forward to running again for re-election.
If you were hit by an asteroid up in Munster before the election, your corpse would still be a Democrat, wouldn't it? Isn't that right?
It would.
Yeah. You're not in a you're not in a close district.
I've had one Democrat run against me in 2012, and they voted in the Republican primary for me, so they got disqualified. So yeah, I would still win.
Well done. But do you think, standing back from any present danger that you may be in, that you look at the party's prospects heading in, you would stipulate that the Democrats are coming after control of the House next time?
Absolutely.
In a way that maybe
And-
even a
and
year
I-
ago was not anticipated.
I think both parties will continue to fight vigorously for every single seat.
You think you have a case to make heading into the election?
I'm an optimist. I think based on what we have done, what we have heard the voters say, and the results we're going to deliver in the next 5 days, finalizing those, is we will be back, and I think Republicans will pick up
Does the
seats.
2012 presidential campaign and the national political environment, Representative Springer, help you or hurt you, and help Republicans or hurt Republicans on the ballot next time?
You know, to me, I think
2020 presidential.
in the 2020 presidential, I think it's a little early to call that. I mean, you know, I think that I'm waiting for the 25th Democrat to announce, Dr. Gonzalez, that she's going to be
She may be
running.
the only Democrat not running, right? Yeah.
She's the only one I know of
Yet.
not running, but
Right.
but maybe she'll pick me for VP.
I think she's more popular than de Blasio nationally, actually.
Yeah, that would not be hard. But
Yeah.
we've got to see what that race looks like. I will say one of the things that I'm excited to see Texas experience at the voter booth is the fact that we no longer have one punch. They have to think about every single person.
You guys loved one punch until you didn't, though.
You know what? There's others who may have. I've never been one who has liked that.
Right.
He's
I will
about
be
that.
honest.
Yeah.
That's
Representative Gonzalez, let me ask you the same question. You head into the next cycle as a Democrat. You've actually got something in your sights that most of us a year ago did not think was possible, and that is, as you know, maybe low percentage chance, but you have not no percentage chance of taking back control of the House heading into redistricting.
Yeah, if you would have told me we would even have a chance, a percentage chance, I probably would have said not for a very long time. But
Right.
you know, I finished my PhD. It's on democracy. For anybody who wants to read 200 pages of like intense academic democracy talk, I am.
I'll put it on the shelf on top of Brian. What's his name? Brian McCall's PhD thesis. So
I
let's
was
sit right on
joking.
top of that, right?
I was joking, but I will say this. I am excited that there is more voter participation. I represent 180,000 people. In my last primarily, 5,000 people voted. We need people to be engaged. We need people to know what's going on here. And so I'm excited that there are more Texans voting. And in that, that brings me hope. And I'll see what happens.
So you are running again. And you will
Evan,
run.
I'll say this. I feel very confident that Dennis Bonnen is not going to be a one-term speaker.
So you feel confident you're going to
Yes.
keep control of the House? I
Yes.
assume?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's go to questions from the audience for the balance of our time. Mr. Lee in the back, gentleman in the front, and Mr. Wooldridge.
A major piece of legislation on local consent today that you think is very important. And is it true that they put a popcorn machine in the members' lounge for the last local consent show? And what do you think about that type of attitude going after the whole calendar when there's really important work to be done?
I'm not entirely sure I get the question.
Yeah, I'm not.
I
Well,
understand-
they
I
knocked
understand the question.
Mother's Day massacre. They knocked off the last local consent calendar, over 100 bills, and I just wanted to know: is there any kind of sentiment going on out there in terms of shenanigans?
So I happen to be vice chair of local, and Drew and I are in local actually together. I think what he's saying is by placing the last local after the fact that we can't hear any more bills, if those bills die, that's the end of them. And does that create maybe some possibilities for negative things to happen? Here's what I will say. My bill, my pecan thievery bill, died in the last local calendar a week ago, and that was devastating for me. But it will also, that bill had so much struggle to get out of committee and work it through the stakeholders. And so any bill usually this late, it was a lot of things that had to happen to get it there. And so maybe it's okay if it's next session, right? So am I worried about it? Only if it can't come back till next session, so.
Is there time, let me ask this sort of the three of you as a follow-on to that. Is there time now between, Ross always says nothing is over until it's over, nothing is dead until it's dead, and even after that, it's like one of those horror movies where the bad guy pops out of the lake in the last minute of the... Is there still time for stuff to happen that we'll be shocked by, that will be
Yes.
horrible and terrible?
Well,
If we're here, there's always.
there's always time to, yeah,
Absolutely.
until we leave.
Anything you want to tell us about possibly to keep an eye out for that could happen that's terrible? I mean, you're trying to tamp down my cynicism about where we are with HB3.
Well, haven't you ever heard a woman should be a little mysterious?
Yeah, I'm not buying that answer. I'm sorry. Sir.
Shortly before the session, Congress passed one of the most significant criminal justice reform packages in a long time. If Congress can do it, then so can the legislature. Do you feel like that issue was appropriately addressed by the House, or did it not get the attention that it needs? And were those ideas well received in the Senate?
In fact, Texas took a lot of credit for what happened at the national level, probably in some measure justifiably for being the leader on that, but there didn't seem to be as much activity on that as we thought there might be.
I'll let the lawyer go.
Oh, okay. There was an incredible bill. That's one of the few things that Washington has actually been able to accomplish in recent memory together in a bipartisan way. And I see some of my friends from TPPF here today. Brooke Rollins, of course, who's in the White House right now. TPPF has been, with other groups, on the vanguard, the forefront of criminal justice reform. Other groups here as well. I'm sorry I haven't mentioned everyone, but Texas has done a number of things this session. Joe Moody has been on the leading end of that to make sure that we're not that we're getting people back on their feet, that we're not imprisoning people that we're mad at, that we're imprisoning people that we're scared of, and that we have a criminal justice system that's tough, but that's smart. And there's a number of things we did this session, but
But there were a lot that you didn't do.
There are some things we didn't do as well.
But I do think that you're right. The federal government did do this really great thing that really motivated us. I'll give an example. The federal government said you couldn't shackle pregnant women in jails. I had that bill at the state level for counties, and so I am glad the federal government did that. I think it gives us space to transform the state, and that will just take a little bit more time.
But it's going to take longer.
I've got a bill, to answer your question, Joe. I've got a bill on the Senate calendar today that we passed out of the House, an occupational licensing bill to help people who have served their sentence, paid their debts to society, to get back on their feet and to get occupational licenses from the state so that they can get jobs. That bill is one that I am watching very closely today on the Senate side.
Will it pass?
It better. I'll just put it that way. Yes, I think it will pass today.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, we'll go to the question here in a second. One of the things about the session is that if you were not focused on public ed or on property taxes, one theory was it was very hard to get anybody's attention, right? If you were transportation, you were healthcare. I mean, there was some stuff around the edges, but the reality is those big issues largely did not get Representative Springer dealt with.
Right.
That was not this session.
I mean, big issues, I think you have to rev the engine. You've got to be, full throttle on it. In the interim, letting everybody know that that is what we're going to tackle. I think a lot of what we heard, great conversations, great discussion. I think all three of us would have liked to see more done on the criminal justice reform and some other things. But I think that is setting the pathway for what we're going to be looking for.
So in the way that we had
we
had a school finance commission in the last interim that essentially set up the discussion of public ed in this next. So what is the big thing in the interim going to be this time that's going to set up for the next one? Do you know? Do you have a sense?
No, I mean, I think, for me, you guys know, I love working on tax stuff and working with Chairman Burrows. I think one of those is can we find a relief mechanism in property tax?
Sales tax swap comes back potentially as a topic.
Or
of conversation.
whatever type of swap.
Or revenue.
Whatever type of swap, because I think to find $20 billion of cuts, we know we don't have that over there. Or we darn sure don't have the appetite to say we're going to cut $20 billion of anything to be able to produce property tax relief. So the only way you're going to do it is doing a swap. What swap would people buy into?
I will say I agree with that. I think that the revenue component is going to be an interim conversation, and I think there are still things that we didn't get done that we need to do more. Maternal mortality. We didn't do a lot. When you said healthcare, that was the first thing that came to my head. There's still a lot to do in that area, criminal justice. So I think that we'll still be busy during the interim.
Right. Representative, what would you like to see the interim be focused on?
Oh man, there's a number of education will of course continue to drive the conversation. Transportation, I think we've got to look at a better, more effective statewide approach to transportation. Look, people are coming by the millions, and we don't have the road capacity right now to for them not to be stuck in traffic all the time. And so we got to continue to look at roads. The tax issue is going to continue to be a big issue, and then I know it's the end of our discussion. I don't want to make news, but I think we need to look at the death penalty. I believe very strongly.
Well, you've talked about this before, and the fact is that the people are moving a little bit more to.
I think there's a growing number of Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals who are increasingly uncomfortable with the fact that we've got innocent men on death row.
Never come into my house and say, I don't want to make news.
Well,
what are you talking about? I want you to make news every time. Sir. No, you should, yeah, right, you're good. Or take the mic.
First, Representative Gonzalez, I would absolutely love to read what you actually wrote. I'm a big democracy person, so please.
One taker for your thesis.
But this is really to the conservative members. One of the big pillars of conservative, politics is the praise for local government. And with the passing of SB 22, SB 1978, and even the introduction of SB 9 and SB 15, those seem like pretty strong strikes at the power and the will of local government. So I'm
not to mention SB 2.
Right, and so I'm just wondering how you say local government is really important to us, and then introduce or pass those bills, and how do you reconcile that with the Texans people?
Right, this is the latest version of the you guys say that you care about local control, but you only seem to want to control the locals conversation. Right.
Well, I mean, obviously I'm the most familiar with the SB2 aspect, and I think when we talk about local control from our aspect, we're talking about that individual voter, the most local of local. And when they don't have that ability to have a say in things, I've had arguments I have 110 county judges and commissioners alone. And when they say, well, if we do something, we stand on the ballot, I said, no, only 2 of you stand this time. We cannot change you, so you can do 3 years of deals without having to answer for them in that respect. And so, you know, having that threshold, that trigger move down, I'm fine with it.
You sell it as a positive. Representative Leach, we've talked about this before. You and the mayor of Plano are friendly, work well together.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I have to believe, I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's a reasonable guess, he was opposed to almost every one of those bills that was
He was.
named. Right. So when you go back home and talk to your friend, the mayor of Plano, what do you tell him about what you did and how you respect his service as mayor?
I'm much more concerned about my conversations with my constituents and taxpayers as much as I have respect for and appreciate the mayor.
He's a constituent?
He's actually not in my district, but he does represent my biggest city. I stipulated. But I'm going to talk to him. Look, we disagreed on it. And I'm hearing loud and clear from my voters that they want to say, when their property taxes go up, when they're faced with the reality of being taxed out of their homes, I believe very strongly that they ought to have a say when their taxes go up in a substantial amount. And I just disagree with the mayor on that. The ultimate, most pure form of local control is voter control, and that's what we've done with SB 2.
And so the other issues, which are not tax issues, essentially a version of the same answer, which is anything that we're doing to control the degree to which local officials get to decide some of these things, this is on behalf of voters.
Well, that's right. I mean, look, the state legislature, the Senate passed my HJR 38, which is going to put a state income tax ban before the voters this fall. We know what we believe here, but what's more important is what the people of Texas believe, and so we're going to put it forward in front of the voters, and the voters will speak to us just like they're going to speak to their counties and their cities.
You opposed SB 2, Representative Gonzalez. You opposed 1978.
Of course.
You opposed 22.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Do you think they're wrong about local control being in the hands of voters as opposed to local officials?
I think democracy is more complex. I think that voting is a part of it, but I'll give an example. Sorry, love you.
Here comes the punch.
Yeah.
No. So here's what I will say. We have to be more thoughtful about it. So if we are upset, like a county commissioner raises taxes and we're like, well, and the county commissioner responds, well, you get to vote me out if you don't like my decisions. At some level, we also have to trust leadership. We also have to know that they have the time and the energy. My mom has 10, 11 children with me. She can't go to the county commissioner's court and like go through budgets and understand, but she can go vote and vote people out who she does not agree with. And I think it's a lot to say to tell a citizen, figure out everything that's happening behind the scenes, and as opposed to really allowing our leaders who are elected to make the decisions that are necessary for all our local communities. That's a philosophical difference. And so I really believe in local control. The local people are at the forefront, understanding the issues that's happening in that community.
We will be having this conversation again, I know, next session. I feel confident. 9 o'clock, we got to let these guys go back up the street, let you all get out to the world. Please give them a big hand. Dr. Gonzalez, Representative Leach, Representative Springer. Thank you all. Good. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.